There are moments when the world doesn't announce that something important has ended. It doesn't warn you. It doesn't explain itself. It simply goes quiet. That kind of quiet settled over Rome on a morning that should have felt ordinary. The city that has lived through centuries of noise, power, and spectacle seemed to slow its breath. Streets moved differently. Conversation softened. Even time itself felt reluctant to move forward. Inside one of Rome's most historic basilicas, the silence deepened. This was not a celebration. It was not a performance. It was not history being made. It was history being closed. Valentino Garavani was gone, and for the first time in decades, the world of fashion didn't know what to say. People arrived dressed in black, not because tradition demanded it, but because anything else would have felt dishonest. These were individuals who lived in a world of color, drama, and attention. Yet today, they chose restraint. Anne Hathaway entered without spectacle. No rush of assistance. No carefully timed moment. She walked slowly, her expression calm but distant, as if she had already said goodbye long before this day arrived. To the public, she was a star. To Valentino, she was something far more personal. A presence he trusted, a friendship he valued, a reminder that joy existed beyond appearances. Her posture said everything words couldn't. Moments later, Donatella Versus arrived. A woman known across the world for confidence and fearless expression now moved quietly, her energy softened by respect. The media had spent years framing designers as rivals, but that story didn't belong here. What existed between Donatella and Valentino was not competition. It was mutual understanding. Two artists who believed deeply that beauty deserved discipline. Tom Ford stood among the mourners, composed and reflective. His influence on modern fashion is undeniable, yet here, his presence carried humility. He wasn't there as a visionary. He was there as a student of legacy, honoring someone who shaped the rules long before they were rewritten. Anna Wintour's presence carried the weight of decades. She had watched Valentino evolve, documented his work, protected his place in fashion history. On this day, she wasn't observing trends. She was witnessing the end of something she knew would never be repeated. Inside the basilica, nothing felt excessive. White flowers surrounded a single portrait of Valentino. The image wasn't dramatic, it didn't demand attention. It simply existed, calm, dignified, eternal. The setting felt intentional, almost as if Valentino himself had designed it. Clean lines, balanced space, emotion without excess. No one rushed to speak. No one tried to fill the silence. Because everyone understood something instinctively, words would only weaken the moment. Outside, the crowd gathered quietly. Fashion students who studied his work as if it were scripture. Admirers who had never met him but felt changed by what he created. Some wore black. Some wore a hint of red, not for style, but for remembrance. A subtle tribute to a color Valentino turned into a language the world learned to recognize. No instructions were needed. No rules were explained. Grief organized itself. Valentino had never believed in loud beauty. He believed in permanence, in patience, in the idea that true elegance didn't ask for attention. It earned it over time. And as the doors of the basilica closed behind the final guests, a realization settled into the air. Heavy and undeniable fashion hadn't just lost a designer. It had lost its compass. For decades, Valentino stood as proof that refinement still mattered in a world increasingly addicted to speed. That craftsmanship could survive without spectacle. That romance didn't need reinvention to remain relevant. Now, that proof was gone. And for the first time in a very long time, the industry felt unsure of itself. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of questions. Before the world learned to pronounce his name with reverence, before his designs became symbols of quiet power, Valentino Garavani lived by a belief that would shape everything that followed. Beauty should never feel rushed. In a world that constantly demanded speed, attention, and novelty, Valentino chose something far more difficult: patience. He believed elegance was not something you chased. It was something you waited for, something you earned through discipline and devotion. As a young man, he learned to see details others ignored. The fall of fabric against the body, the way posture changed when someone felt confident, the difference between something that impressed for a moment and something that stayed in memory for a lifetime. When he returned to Italy after training abroad, He wasn't interested in disruption. He wasn't trying to shock or provoke. His ambition was quieter, almost rebellious in its restraint, to create beauty that felt inevitable rather than forced. And slowly the world noticed. Women didn't come to Valentino seeking attention. They came seeking reassurance. His designs didn't overpower. They supported. They held space for the person wearing them, allowing strength and softness to exist together. That trust became his greatest achievement. While fashion evolved into spectacle, Valentino remained grounded. Seasons changed. Trends rose and vanished. He stayed loyal to craftsmanship, even when it was no longer fashionable to do so. Critics sometimes called his work traditional. Others called it romantic. Valentino never corrected them. He understood something they didn't. Trends are temporary, but dignity lasts. That understanding shaped his entire career. At his farewell, those values were visible everywhere. There were no dramatic speeches attempting to summarize a lifetime of work. No performances meant to impress. The absence of excess felt intentional, as if the space itself understood his philosophy. Many attendees chose not to speak publicly at all. Designers who usually commanded headlines avoided microphones. Celebrities declined interviews. This was not a moment for content. It was a moment for reflection. Those closest to Valentino later spoke about the warmth behind his composed public image. He loved laughter. He loved joy. He believed beauty was meaningless if it wasn't accompanied by humanity. There were stories of late nights filled with music and conversation, of moments when the designer stepped away from perfection and allowed himself to be fully present, laughing, dancing, celebrating life. Anne Hathaway remembered him not just as a legend, but as someone who made people feel seen. That mattered to him more than acclaim ever did. Donatella Versace's quiet presence spoke volumes. The fashion world often framed designers as rivals, but that narrative dissolved in moments like this. What remained was mutual respect, a shared understanding that their work was not about ego, but legacy. Fashion historians observing the farewell noticed something striking. The atmosphere reflected Valentino's design language perfectly. Balanced, restrained, emotional without indulgence. One expert described it as a goodbye designed by the man himself. Yet beneath the grace and reverence, an uncomfortable question lingered. The industry Valentino helped build no longer resembles the one he believed in. Fashion today thrives on immediacy, on constant reinvention, on visibility above all else. Valentino stood as proof that another path existed, one where patience still mattered, where beauty could unfold slowly. With his absence, many quietly admitted what few dared to say aloud: there may never be another like him. And that realization made the silence feel even heavier. As days passed after the farewell in Rome, something subtle began to surface. Not in headlines, not on runways, but in conversations held quietly behind closed doors. People weren't asking who would replace